Next, hey net exclaim.
Here net exclaim.
Let's boil the Wolverine.
The Wolverines.
Next.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night.
Hello and welcome to the Not Ready for Primetime podcast. We're Gary Seath and Brad Robinson.
And you're not.
This is our first show, Brad, premiere episode, and we're going to review season 1, episode 1, the premiere episode of Saturday Night Live. This show originally aired on October 11th, 1975. The host of the show is George Carlin, and the musical guests were Billy Preston and Janis Ian. Brad, this was an interesting episode.
There is both literally and figuratively a lot to unpack here.
There's a lot going on. Obviously, this is the first show, and they are trying to figure out what's working for them and what's working for 11:30 on Saturday nights.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to remember or know, if you don't remember, that the show didn't start out great. Like, it really took some time to figure out what it was, and it's very evident in this first episode.
It very much is. I believe you've used the term just throwing shit at the wall for this episode, and that's exactly how it feels.
Well, admittedly, too. I mean, Lorne Michaels was extremely worried about not having enough material, so he overbooked it. So not only do you have George Carlin, you have 2 other stand-up comedians doing bits and 2 musical acts, each of them doing 2 songs each, plus a short film.
Plus a very long Muppet sketch.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's just a lot going on here.
There is a lot going on. There's just a lot to dissect and go through with this. Like, I can't imagine booking all of this and then being afraid that you're going to fall short of time.
I think it's just the uncertainty of not knowing what you have and or what's going to work. So throw it all up and see what sticks.
They certainly did throw everything up. But there were parts of the show that are great.
Yeah, like anything, some things work, some don't. I think the most interesting thing is just to look at it in comparison to what the show becomes, like how different and or similar this show particular is from what it is in episode 4, what it is in episode 12, what it is in season 12.
Yeah, and no one knew what to expect from this show.
I mean, should we talk briefly about why it even exists, like how it came about?
I think that makes sense for the first episode.
So I think most people know the story at this point. Johnny Carson, king of late night, was tired of having his reruns done on the weekends. And so NBC was stuck finding something new. And so they tapped this young Canadian, Lorne Michaels, and he decides to come up with a new variety show for quote unquote us, for his generation, our generation of counterculture kids, young, hip. So there's no blueprint. You know, they're making it up as they go.
So it was different than anything else that was on TV at the time.
Yeah. I mean, starting with the host, George Carlin as your first host.
A risky choice, maybe, or a ballsy choice, I guess I can say.
Yeah, for several reasons, I would say. I mean, as we now know, like, he's not in any sketches.
He's not in any sketches. He does 4 stand-up bits.
Yeah, it's more like he's like the MC of the episode as opposed to your host.
Yeah, but even that, the MC introduces acts. He introduces Janis Ian, I think, at one point, and that's it.
That's about it. Yeah. There was a sketch he was supposed to be in at one point that Michael O'Donoghue had written about Alexander the Great going back to his high school reunion. But then he realized he couldn't pull that off. And I mean, admittedly, Carlin has said back in time he was completely drugged up at the time. Yeah. And not like mentally capable of dealing with hardly any of this.
Right. It's an interesting spot to be in, that first guest spot, high pressure. There's a lot riding on it. It's live television.
Well, and they've never, as we said, they've never done this before. So like Carlin himself, I think, was naturally just freaked out when he showed up on whatever day, Monday, Tuesday. And they're like, yeah, we don't know what we're doing Saturday.
Right.
Like, here's what we're trying. We got a bunch of stuff. We could do this. We could do that. And I think as it went on, he got more and more freaked out. And the drugs probably did not help. But he was just, finally tapped out and was like, I'm going to do monologues. made a deal apparently with Lorne where it was like, well, as long as there's nothing, offensive or, that's not going to upset people, which he held through pretty well till the end. But yeah, we end up getting a hodgepodge of, let's try it, see what works.
That's an interesting take you have there, that the drugs did not help his anxiety. That's, you could start a PSA campaign around that.
Just say no.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to watch. I think these first few episodes, this whole first season, actually, I think is going to be a very interesting revisit of what this show actually was when it started, realistically, and what it ended up becoming. I mean, if you've never seen this episode before and you go back to watch it now, it looks almost nothing like we know the show now. Like, it's a completely different show.
Well, should we get into the first episode here? Talk about it?
I think we should, because we have like 65 different bits we've got to get into. So let's get going.
All right. The show starts with the first ever cold open. First shot we ever see is of Michael O'Donoghue in a living room set, which is kind of odd. It starts out like a normal sketch.
It's funny you say normal sketch, because again, remember, at this point, there's no normal sketch.
Exactly.
At this point, there's nothing. So that, the whole idea of this quote unquote cold open was Lauren's idea. Let's show them something they've never seen before. It turns on all of a sudden. You're like, what the fuck is going on? Yeah.
And turns into it's just Michael O'Donoghue and John Belushi.
This is a clip. We've all seen this hundreds of times by now, but he plays the instructor, for lack of a better word, and Belushi walks in and takes his English class. And I mean, by the time you realize what's going on, it's over. I mean, is this even 2 minutes long, this bit?
No, it's not. It's very fast. It's a minute and a half before Chevy comes on. That's it. But that's the point that I don't think ever dawned on me, was you don't know really what you're watching, right? So you're watching this funny thing where an English instructor is telling a guy about the Wolverines and feeding your fingertips to the Wolverines. And then you see the guy grasp his heart and fall over to the ground. And there's a pause before Belushi does the same. So it's kind of, there's no context really to what's going on. It's strange.
Yeah, well, it's very Michael O'Donoghue, obviously, who also wrote it. And I mean, it does everything I think they want. It kind of shocks the audience as to, you don't know what you're watching. O'Donoghue does the heart attack. Belushi's character mimics. This is probably one of, if not the hardest sketch, I think, to watch, because we're watching it with everything we know. We know who Belushi is. We know what a cold open is. We know what it's going to be. And it's almost impossible to imagine what it was like to watch this when it happened. Literally not knowing what was going on.
Well, not knowing what was going on, but just thinking about all of this in hindsight, in that context, right? Chevy Chase then comes on as the stage manager and talks into a headset. And I think the way he walks onto set, so just kind of nonchalant, like in my mind, I'm thinking on paper, it may have played funnier if he like rushes in and looks panicked that they both have fallen to the ground. Just in that context of no one knows what the hell's going on. No one knows who Belushi is and who Michael O'Donoghue is.
I hear you. I would argue, I think that would play more into the what's going on aspect as opposed to the comedy aspect of it, and thinking it through. I think it all works. I think everything in this works great. The length, the writing, it's Belushi's best bit of the night, unfortunately. I think it's his best sketch he does. Not that he does that much, but yeah, not that any of them do that much other than Chevy, really. But yeah.
Right. And really, Chevy's big thing is Weekend Update.
But it's great. And it's a great segue into, them live from New York at Saturday night, which at the time was the title of the show.
But yeah, Chevy says live from New York at Saturday night. To your point, the show was called NBC's Saturday Night at the time. And the opening credits are interesting because the star of the show is billed as George Carlin.
Right. Yeah, with guests.
Yeah. Janis and Billy Preston.
And a laundry list of others.
Yeah. They even list a film by Albert Brooks, Jim Henson's Muppets.
The audio sounds shitty to you?
The audio throughout the entire episode sounds shitty.
Right. But particularly here, it's like the band, again, it's like if they had this much time to practice and come up with something, that's what they're doing. It sounds a little ragtag, but
yeah.
Again, maybe works for the vibe too of the show, being kind of counterculture underground sort of thing.
And then we hear the not for ready primetime players.
Yeah, SNL's first mistake, Don Pardo.
The not for ready primetime players.
But yeah, not ready for primetime players. As was known, there was another show called Saturday Night Live on ABC with Howard Cosell at this point that came out that beat them to the punch this year. And their cast was called The Primetime Players, which included Bill Murray.
Yes.
So it was a fun take on that. I think the term was coined by Herb Sargent at the time, one of the writers, to call them the not ready for primetime players.
Herb Sargent, who would be the main writer for Weekend Update for many years.
Many, many years. Well, we should also state it's the only time in the show we see George Coe credited as a cast member. He gets one episode.
He was, right? Yeah. He was in other episodes this season, but this was the only time he was a cast member.
Yeah, George Coe is an older actor who was hired into the season, in theory, to play a lot of the older roles in the sketches when it required. They quickly realized they didn't need him. He kind of stood out and they could do it within the core group. He pops up again a couple times later on, and many of the pre-tapes that they did, in the summer, he's in. So he pops in later in the season.
Or George Coe.
Academy Award nominee, George Coe.
What was he nominated for?
He co-directed and co-starred in a short film that was like in '69, was nominated for Best Short Film.
Interesting. All right. Well, there you go. Thanks for that George Coe knowledge you dropped on me.
There you go. There's your George Coe tidbit for the day.
I mean, we could have had, a series of films by George Coe, but we got Albert Brooks.
Well, I can tell what you're doing. I'm not falling for it yet. We have 18 segments to go to before then.
It's not far from the truth. George Carlin comes out for the first ever monologue in SNL history, which is just a stand-up routine, which is fine.
From the rafters, almost. From the upper deck, at least.
He comes down through the audience from upstairs.
Yeah. I think another example of let's try things out live on air. Okay, let's do something different. Come down through the crowd. And then we get, the first real joke, quote unquote joke of SNL history is a nice drug reference about the hash marks. He
does not shy away from the drug references on live television.
And I liked his first monologue. I mean, obviously George Carlin is one of the best. And, I think I felt like he started out a little bit rough on this, took him a couple bits to get up to speed on where he wanted to. But then by the end, he gets into his signature wordplay and it was, what classic George Carlin.
Yeah. And this is a bit that I've heard before outside of SNL, probably after this aired, the football versus baseball bit. And it, you could tell he was like getting his footing with everything, with the crowd, with the cameras, with everything.
And then just as he does, we go to commercial.
Yeah. It does seem like it's it is, right? It's in the middle of his set. That's basically what it is. The music plays and the music plays him
they
off.
play him off.
Yeah, as if he won an award. Congratulations, George. No, it totally felt like, oh, this is live TV and you're still going. We're just gonna play you off.
It just ends. And yeah, like you say, at this point, you don't know, is he done? Like, when do we see him? What else is he doing in this episode? He just leaves.
Right.
But that's, as we learn, it's going to be par for the course tonight.
Yeah. All right. From there, the first commercial parody in SNL history.
New Dad,
which is funny. The first time I watched it, it didn't click that it was a pre-tape.
And this is another example of like, what were people thinking? Again, we know who Dan Aykroyd is now.
Right.
We know commercial parodies is something this show does and does a lot of. But if you happen to watch it that night, you don't know who he is. You don't know there's no audience sound to trigger you. You're watching TV. Like, how many people think this is an actual commercial?
Yeah, it's very interesting in that context. And as the first episode ever, not knowing anything, I think it was surprising to me to realize like, oh, this woman is not Lorraine, Gilda, or Jane.
Okay, yeah, exactly. You know now she's not, but at the time you don't know who those people are. You think she's somebody in the cast. I mean, it opens up so simple. You're on a set. There's a mom and a small child. A dad walks in, and you hear the voiceover ad of like, "What do you do if you lose your dad?" And then you learn what the sketch is about, and then he basically gets replaced by Chevy Chase at the end. So it plays well. It's funny, but it's a very odd way to introduce people to your show so early on, I feel like.
It is. But in the totally understated Chevy Chase way of how he comes in as the new dad, he like says hi to the son and then the wife and then sits down and has the wife come over and he just starts making out with her. Who plays the wife in this sketch?
It's the future Mrs. Chevy Chase. Jacqueline Carlin is her name.
Got it. And then we go to an introduction from Don Pardo, which was kind of weird, of Billy Preston.
What's weird is that you call him Don Pardo.
Why? What do you want me to call him?
Pardo?
Oh.
I'm just saying your choice of accent is interesting.
Yeah. That's the French pronunciation. Oh, with Billy Preston. That guy's awesome. He comes out in a sparkly shirt with a scarf. He's amazing.
Yeah, #1 song from the year before. It's a great song. Billy's great. And this is fun. This is a fun performance.
He's the most energetic thing so far in this show.
Well, and to that, what you're talking about there too, it's also interesting. It's not a sketch either. Like we haven't actually seen a real sketch yet. It's very interesting. They put a musical number so high up in the programming of this show.
It's awesome. It's a great performance.
I wish we could hear it.
I was just going to say, I guess it sounded great live.
I mean, there is a drummer because they show him. So I know there's drums in this bit, but until they cut away to the guy, I couldn't have told you that there were.
No. A lot of audio problems in this show throughout, but this was the one place that was just it was crushing that they didn't get the audio right on this.
Like, imagine how much better this would be if you could hear it proper.
Oh, man. Watching Billy Preston live it's just like, this is a performance where I'm like, oh, I wish I were there.
Yes. Like you said, the energy is high. He's having a blast, probably because he is high. But it's great. It was a great song. Perfect first song in SNL history. Great.
And they're like on this great set with graffiti and like to your whole counterculture point, it makes it look like he's like on the street somewhere or something performing. And it's amazing.
And like props to SNL for like their first musical guest being an African-American guy, like how many times you seen that on national television at this point in time. So like, yeah, it was great. And he was fucking awesome.
He was great. After that wonderful performance by Billy Preston, we get a courtroom scene.
Oh, we finally get a sketch.
Yeah, we finally get a live sketch with most of the cast. Jane Curtin is playing a witness on the stand. George Coe's the judge.
Yeah, Garrett and Chevy Chase play Laura. And it's basically, and actually we should use sketch in quotes because it's really just a long setup for one punchline of Jane not wanting to say what was said to her and writes it down on a piece of paper and they hand it down the jurors until Gilda gets woken up, and then it's all for her reaction. It's all for her reaction is where this goes.
It is. It's a big setup for her reaction. It is the first time we see Gilda, and she's, I don't know. I think her reaction is great.
I don't know. I did not like this. It was.
But what about this don't you like?
There's just nothing there. Like, I don't mind one note sketches, long sets. Like sometimes they work. This just, to me, there's just, maybe because it was so short, I don't like, by the time you realize what's going on, they get out. Like, it's literally a buildup for Gilda to wink and give a, like, I don't know. There's just nothing there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you. There's not a whole lot there. I think it only worked for me because it was Gilda Radner.
I mean, it was fine. It's just, we've talked more about it than it actually is. Like, it's just, yeah.
It is. It is a long setup for a wink. And you're right. I get that.
I mean, the most interesting thing about this sketch is that we get to see Richard Belzer in the jury. That's about it.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. He's sitting down at the end of the row of jurors and you see him for maybe 2 seconds on screen, but it's definitely Richard Belzer.
Yeah. Well, he was doing the opening act.
He was the warm up.
Yeah. He was doing warm up. So he was around, and we see him a bunch throughout the early years. He pops in from time to time, as well as there's another guy who's sitting behind John and Gilda, Neil Levy. We'll see him a bunch, who ends up becoming a writer later on. But you'll see him in a lot of sketches, like when they need extra guys.
Yeah.
He's one of the guys they throw in.
Well, how did you feel about the next bit, which was Andy Kaufman's Mighty Mouse sketch? Not sketch, sorry.
I would argue this is the most thought out and fully developed bit of the night.
Totally. Yes. 100%. It is the most developed bit of the night.
He's great. I mean, his performance is great when you sit there and watch it. Like, if you watch his hands, Like his hands are like have that like nervous twitch, like he doesn't know what to do, and they just keep like his fingers are always moving. And then there's the bit where he almost comes in at the wrong part and catches himself, which is hilarious. Juxtaposed, yeah, exactly what you're gonna say. Juxtaposed with then he's like confidently takes a drink of water later on because he knows he's got 20 seconds of nothing. It's such a fun bit. It's so good.
It's so good. He's so good. And this was, when I first started watching SNL, you would watch clip shows and anniversary specials and whatever. And this was always one of them, to the part where I was confused for a little bit about Andy Kaufman being on Saturday Night Live and being a member or like I couldn't figure it out because this sketch is so ingrained in my head.
And I think it still exists in clips. Like I think if you watch a clip show today or when they do the 50th anniversary, this clip will be in there.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah.
This is brilliant.
It's funny. And it's weird because like Andy Kaufman, I don't have an undying love for Andy Kaufman. I kind of like I'm hot or cold. I either really like him or I really don't. And I think this is one of his things that really works and is really funny and is really good.
I 100% agree with you.
And then we go from one comedian's performance back to another. George Carlin, monologue number 2.
This one definitely, I felt like he had more confidence going into this one. He was a little steadier, a little more confident in his set.
I think it's funny you think George Carlin might not be confident doing a set that he had already done before. I actually didn't even think this was that good. This is probably my least favorite of the 4 that he did this night, but just felt kind of like, like kind of middling. It was just kind of not going through the motions, but
this is, he talks about watching old movies and seeing crowds and wondering if anyone in the movie is dead or how many of the people in the crowd are dead.
Do you ever look at the crowds in old movies and wonder if they're dead yet? Have you ever tried to throw away?
Yeah, that was. I'll give it credit. That was funny. I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't funny. That was funny. The line about what do dogs do on their day off. But again, I guess I've heard it too. That's the other problem too. Is like some of this we've just heard so many times. If you're a George Carlin fan, you know these bits.
But wait, did you not in that moment look at the crowd in the SNL studio and wonder the same thing? Because I did. I was watching it and I was like, oh, I wonder, in fact, George Carlin is dead. How many of these people am I watching that are dead?
It didn't even dawn on me to think of that. But
it kind of distracted me from the rest of his bit. I had to rewatch it and I was like, that wasn't worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go down that road right now, but yeah, that's a very interesting, that is funny. Again, it just ends so abrupt and so quick. And it's like before you have time to really get in it, it's almost like instead of doing 4 little monologues, maybe do 2 pieces, give them longer time to let people get a momentum and get into it. So, because this just ends super abrupt and it's like, oh, by the way, here's Janis Ian. It was almost like a award show patter. Like, hey, go out and do 45 seconds and then introduce Janis Ian. Would you please?
Janis Ian sitting on stage with a guitar.
Looking miserable.
Looking like she did not want to be there at all.
Which, and again, it's the pacing. Like everything's just been so quick. And now we cut to Janis Ian. This felt so long.
Yes. So we should say it's Janis Ian singing her song At 17.
Which was a big hit. It was like number 3 the month beforehand. So it's definitely like a popular song. But I mean, just the timing of the song is longer than anything else we've seen so far. And the performance is just so, it's not bad. It is what it is. It just was a not great fit at this point in time of the show, I feel like.
It is the complete opposite of the Billy Preston performance. Billy Preston was energetic, loud, having fun on stage. And Janis Ian is just standing there with a guitar, with her eyes closed for most of the time, singing.
For the audio of this show is probably the best thing she could have done, is stand there with a guitar. There were some drums. You actually heard a little drums anyway. But yeah, I mean, not to shit on Janis Ian, but yeah, it just was, it was a popular song, just felt weird in the vibe of the show and at this place in the show.
And to your point, so far it is the longest thing in the show because this song is longer than Nothing for Nothing.
But that's the thing, you know what I mean? Like that moved so quick. It had such energy to it that like, It didn't feel long to me. It felt fun. This literally felt like watching grass grow.
Yes, it did. It was not fun. Even though we're not the biggest Janisian fans, I could have enjoyed that potentially, but I didn't.
Even if she just would have smiled at the end. Finish the song, give a little nod to the crowd at the end. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. But whatever.
No, I think that's a good point. Just if she pretended to enjoy being there, I might have enjoyed watching her perform.
I could have pretended a little bit to enjoy it. Yes, I could have.
Well, I did enjoy the next bit after Janice Ian's performance.
Oh, let's get back into some comedy, please.
We're going with firsts for this show. This is the first television show on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, first talk show.
First talk show. It's called Victims of Shark Bite, hosted by Jane Curtin, who becomes a staple talk show host on Saturday Night Live.
This is Jane's bread and butter right here. I mean, you can see it. Again, you see the kernels of it here. You can see there's a reason why moving on these first 5 years, if there's a talk show, Jane Curtin is probably the host.
In this episode, Victims of Shark Bite, Belushi comes on and he doesn't have an arm until, I don't know, about a minute in, he starts motioning it towards his leg and he pulls his arm out from under his jacket.
No, it's when he starts counting.
Oh, you're right.
He starts counting how long it's been,
yes.
and he pulls his arm out of his jacket and goes, 3 months.
Yeah.
That's how you find it.
But that is the whole bit.
Yeah, it's basically, I mean, this was the summer of Jaws. So it's, and this isn't the first time that SNL is going to poke fun and capitalize on the Jaws hysteria, but.
You mean the last time?
That is exactly what I meant.
It was the first time.
This was the first time. It will not be the last.
Right.
But to that, what is the point of this sketch? I, as you know, love Belushi, and he's not that funny. It's like, I mean, is this all a gag for him to pull his hand out of the jacket? Yes,
that's what it was. I like how you're trying to find deeper meaning in these sketches.
I don't want some deeper meaning or just like, just more.
For me, the entire point of this sketch turns out to be Jane Curtin is a fantastic talk show host, and this is the first time that we get to see that.
Here's Jane's contempt for somebody.
But does she already?
Time and time again, probably.
That's a shame.
But to your point, like, she's great at this, showing contempt for whoever the idiot is or asshole is sitting across from her.
Right.
There's a reason why she's so good at this. I mean, she's just great in general. Like, she's probably the most underrated cast member of this original era.
I think so. I agree. I mean, she's one of those glue figures, right?
She can there's nothing she can't do.
She grounds the rest of the zany characters.
She can play characters. She can play herself. She can do talk shows. She can do update. Like, she's in a lot of stuff. And even still, people are hesitant to put her in the top of discussions of who's great on the show.
No, totally. But she's definitely one of the strongest women in the first few decades of the show and kind of flies under the radar.
But that's what I'm saying. I wouldn't even say woman. She's
no.
One
you're
of
right.
the strongest actors on the show.
You're right.
Man or woman.
But she's totally overshadowed because of, well, one, Gilda, right? Gilda's like a superstar. And the rest of the cast at this time they're just huge personalities in real life, which she is not.
Right.
Yeah.
And didn't strive for. So
no, she wasn't trying to be.
Speaking of huge personalities,
Michael O'Donoghue is next. That's what you were talking about, right?
Well played. Yes, yeah. Well played.
The next sketch is with Chevy and Michael O'Donoghue again. This is it's another commercial parody for Jamitol.
Another one.
So Jamitol is, what is this sketch? You told me about this.
Jamitol is a commercial parody play on a dietary supplement called Geritol that was very big in the early to mid 70s. And the idea was it was directed towards women as a remedy for like tiredness, nervousness, and irritability, all due to like a lack of vitamins or iron. And this was supposed to replenish those things and give you energy and give you pep. So what's funny about, the sketch itself or what they do is it's the dialogue. A lot of it's taken right from an actual Geritol commercial. So they take actual dialogue with a husband and his wife, don't really change it. But instead of having a wife, or a female, I should say, as the wife, it's Michael O'Donoghue, and not dressed in drag, and doesn't play it up. They just play it as like two guys. This is going to be the wrong word, but straight. And that's where they get the comedy from. So it's interesting, you know, like to that point of it, I think it's a really great sketch. I think it's really funny. It's really smart the way they do it. What I don't totally get is like how hard or heavy they're trying to play into them being a gay couple.
Yeah, it's definitely not overplayed. But that's like, there's no overtly physical comedy to show that they're a gay couple.
Like, are they trying to be smart? Are they trying to be cheeky about it? Like, it's very weird how they address it. Yeah, that's the part that I haven't been able to like come down on how I feel about it, but I think it's funny and it's performed well. I mean, I feel like the physical overtness is like the title of it. Like,
yeah, no, it's a strange piece. I guess, was that pre-taped?
Yeah, this was another pre-tape. They did a lot of these pre-tapes, you know, before the show started. So they'd have a bunch of stuff in their back pocket, obviously, you know, like, oh, the show's, you know, we're a little short here. We need something between these two sketches. We'll throw these. And we'll see a lot of these ads again. And this one, I believe that when they shot this, Chevy wasn't in the cast yet. He was still a writer.
He was just a writer.
He was a writer. And he's gone on and told stories where actually this bit, or his performance in this, as evidence that he could be more than just a writer on the show and elevate him into one of the cast members.
Well, there you go. I guess it all worked out for him in the end. Anyway, that was Jamatol.
It's Michael O'Donoghue trying to be edgy.
Yeah.
You know, Michael O'Donoghue is all edge all the time. So he's always swinging for the fences of what's edgy and offensive and whatnot. So I think when he connects, they go out of the park.
Right.
And I think when he misses big. And I think this is leaning more towards the missing big.
After this, we have a promo from Paul Simon, who is hosting next week's show. Just sitting there with a guitar on his lap because he's a musician, so he needs to have a guitar, looking all like a weird college professor, promoting next week's show.
It was cool to see. I mean, this was fun of playing with the live aspect of the show. You know, it was never advertised in any of the things that Paul Simon would be there. And so a lot of time in those early episodes, the cast would come on and say, oh, next week our host is Buck Henry, or, you know, next week we'll have Candice Bergen. So it was kind of cool to see the actual host there themselves introducing, you know, their act for the next week. But even this felt rushed to me.
It's super quick. It is very fast. Him just saying, hi, my name is Paul Simon. I'll be on the show next week with musical guests. And he mentions Art Garfunkel, I believe, in this one.
Oh, yeah. Well, he promotes the big reunion of the two of them. The first time they'll play together since 67, 68. But It's like, as soon as he's done, it's like, boop, done. I don't know. Again, it's just another quick bit to move us along.
Well, it does move us right into our first ever weekend update with Chevy, who to me feels like he's yelling.
Really?
Yeah. Just for this, I don't know, something about this, like it just felt like he was talking very loudly and also quick, like everything, he's just moving very fast.
Yeah, it's like not even 4 minutes, 4 minutes. It's a little longer than other stuff, but yeah.
Lots of prostitution jokes too.
It works. The stamp joke's great.
The stamp joke is hilarious.
Well, the post office announced today that it is going to issue a stamp commemorating prostitution in the United States. It's a 10-cent stamp, but if you want to lick it, it's a quarter.
I like the few times you can tell Chevy doesn't know what camera to be looking at.
No, yeah.
He like talks to the side and then like it happens a couple of times, which I thought was great.
There's one point where he totally shifts his body to the camera that would be in front of him, and they're on the camera to his side, and he just turns his head. He doesn't like turn
At
back.
some point, he just had to be like, screw it. Like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, this is like, let's just go.
Well, it's funny because you think about this setup, right? And yes, it's a live show and everything, but this is his first time doing something like this. So I'm sure it's jarring, like sitting with multiple cameras, having to go back and forth.
And originally there was an idea that Lauren was going to do this because he had his own show in Canada years before. And part of what he did was very similar of like this reoccurring skit he would have on his show. And then he eventually decided, probably not good if I'm the boss and I'm one of the people dictating who does and does not get on air if I have a reoccurring bit every week. So, steps in Chevy.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And it's interesting because for the first few episodes, at least, if not longer, and I mean, even Chevy's admitted this, it's one of the reasons why is the breakout star from this first season. every episode, you very quickly learned you were getting Chevy time. Even if it's only 3 or 4 minutes, it's Chevy straight into the camera, delivering his name, aside from the fall.
Right.
Aside from the fall, but it's like every episode you're getting Chevy talking to the camera every day.
Right. And I think, to your point, though, like saying his name, and no other cast members have that. Everyone else is introduced as the not ready for primetime players for a while.
And when they're fighting for time. I mean, everybody's, maybe you're in a sketch, maybe you're not. Maybe you're Garrett where you have one line. Or maybe you're Lorraine Newman where you wait halfway through the episode to show up in a remote bit for Weekend Update.
Yeah. Which I thought was funny. Like, not necessarily her bit. She did fine. Like, her remote bit was fine.
Yeah.
It was fine. It's the callback later in the Weekend Update to that remote bit.
The callback's great. I think it's a great gag. It's a great setup, and the callback works perfectly.
So the setup is that Lorraine Newman is live. Her remote spot is live from the Blaine Hotel where there's been a murder, and she's talking about this horrible, gruesome murder. And then later in the Weekend Update, they throw to all of our guests stay at the Blaine Hotel, blah, blah, blah. It's a good callback.
Yeah, it works great. But this is another instance of like hindsight being 2020. I'm watching it, and my first reaction was, "Hey, it's Lorraine."
Right.
But
no one knows.
at the time, you don't know who that is, but you're like, "Where's she been?"
Right.
And then I had to think of like, have we seen Gilda yet? And then I forgot about the 4 seconds she was in the trial. But yeah.
Yeah. I liked the commercial bit too.
Try opening.
I thought it was funny. It's a commercial parody for an arthritis medication called Triopenin. And the whole time there's voiceover and of hands trying to open a bottle of medicine, and they just can't.
Chevy's hands. More
Are they?
Chevy. Yeah, it's Chevy's hands.
I thought it was a really good bit that worked. And then at the end, the bottle's broken and all the pills are strewn out.
Yeah, it's a great piece. Written by Tom Schiller, which is kind of cool. I think it's the only thing he's got written in this episode.
Nice. From there is the callback to the Blaine Hotel.
And then you go back to update for literally, I think, one joke and you're done.
Yeah, back to Chevy, and then that's it. From Weekend Update.
All right, let's get this over with.
We go to our first. I keep saying everything's the first because it is. This is the first Muppets sketch.
What in the hell is this?
It is a long Muppets bit.
Yes, very long. There's so much to try and comprehend as to what's going on here.
Yeah. The Land of Gorch was a Muppet sketch where Gorch is an alien and they live on this planet with the volcanoes and a whole bunch of smoke and all of this set dressing, which was interesting.
Okay, you've said enough. I mean, I guess we can start with the, why they're there.
Yeah.
Again, NBC's looking for a new show. They had 2 things that they brought to the network when they had the show. One were the films by Albert Brooks, and the other was a deal with Jim Henson to create these adult-oriented Muppet characters that were going to be new and part of the show. The problem is they just didn't fit in, and nobody could figure out how to incorporate them well.
No, although they probably do have one of the more complicated sets with smoke and water and volcanoes, and
the set's cool, and the Muppets themselves, like the puppets, they're cool, like they're done well. It's just there's nothing, Jim Henson's team, created and operated them, but the Jim Henson people don't write those sketches. So you've got SNL writers who writing a sketch they don't want to write for.
Right.
Which
do you know who wrote that sketch?
I know who didn't write it.
Right.
Michael O'Donoghue, who famously hated the Muppets, and I think, had a Big Bird doll hanging from the blinds in his office.
Well, I mean, I think that's an interesting point about the writing, because yes, the Henson and his crew create these Muppets, and they're Muppets. They look great for the work they did. Why didn't they write it?
Because they weren't hired as writers on the show, so they couldn't write for the show. And because they were part of the show, say, unlike an Andy Kaufman, who was a performer and would come on and write his own bits from time to time, they were only hired as performers. Basically, they were only hired as performers, not writers.
Got it. But why not just then change them to be like Albert Brooks and say, you guys come on and do your whole thing?
I'm guessing it's because NBC owned them. Like they were hired to do stuff strictly for, you know what I mean?
Right,
NBC property for this, whereas Albert Brooks was just hired as an independent contractor, so to speak, to create movies and then deliver them.
Well, that's a bummer because in general, I love the Muppets, and these Muppet sketches have always confounded me.
It's amazing. This sketch makes an already poorly paced TV show come to a grinding halt.
Can I tell you, do you know how far into the show we are at this point? After the Muppets?
2 hours?
34 minutes.
Shut up.
We are 34 minutes into the show when George Carlin comes back for his third monologue.
It's like they slammed the brakes on the whole show. As much as we were not fans of Janis Ian, it at least felt part organic into the show of like performance and variety show. This is just like a slam on the brakes. Like, how long is this sketch?
It's about 5 minutes.
And it amazes me that this goes long, and yet Billy Crystal gets bumped.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah, I mean, we can wait till we get into Valeri Bromfield, but it just amazes me the choices that were made.
Yeah, I don't understand a lot of the decisions that were made for this show.
And in keeping with the spirit of this show, it just ends.
I think we can abruptly end and move on.
I mean, yeah.
After this is our third stand-up bit by George Carlin.
I like this one. Again, it's George Carlin. He does a stand-up. I thought it was better than the last, but it's a good bit.
This is the third time we've seen him tonight, and the other 2 times were good and ended kind of abruptly themselves. And so it's just you're left with, he's back, and we're only 34 minutes into the show.
But I will say, at least now you're going to see him. You're like, okay, here's George Carlin again. We're probably going to see him again. Like, it does play a little bit into setting some kind of a motif. But again, I would have liked less segments, but the segments to be longer.
Longer and a little more thought out, I think.
Well, again, I mean, that could have been the drugs.
It could have been the drugs. It did, it was interesting because some of the sketches felt like,
I just meant his.
Just meant Carlin's.
I just meant Carlin's bits could have been the drug, not the sketches.
Okay.
Like Carlin's bits, I would have liked. Yeah, in regards to the Carlin bits, I would have liked less George Carlin, but longer George Carlin.
Right.
Like 2 longer pieces,
I was going to say,
as opposed to 4 short.
Right.
Yeah.
After this, we have The Impossible Truth, a short film by Albert Brooks.
I see you waiting. I see you waiting for me to say something.
I do, because I watched this and I was like, oh, it's okay. There's some funny bits in there.
It's okay. I agree. It's funny. There are a couple great lines in it. It's one of those, what a spoof, what's it called? March of the News or March. It's like an old newsreel footage.
It's a fake newsreel is what it is. The first bit is about a blind cabbie in New York City.
Right. And the second is Israel and the state of Georgia trading places.
Right. Yeah.
And then the last one is, about the age of consent being dropped from 18 to 7.
Yeah, that was unsettling. But the blind cab driver I found amusing.
Oh, that was my least favorite.
Really?
Well, they had better lines. Like, I liked the line of the Georgia-Israel trade agreement where the governor or whatever from Georgia's like, my state is looking forward to the heat without the humidity.
Yeah.
And then I actually thought the last bit about with the little girl was joke-wise the funniest. It probably doesn't play the best nowadays, but there's a line where he's, asks her something and she just looks at him. I can't read yet.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Again, Albert Brooks is one of the guys who was brought in when they brought in the show. Part of the deal was he was going to make 6 short films. This wasn't even the first film he did, or wasn't supposed to be the first film. It was the second. It made it in because it was short enough and would help fit the abundance of programming they were putting on this episode.
Think about that, though. You get hired to make 6 short films. I wonder, I don't know. I wonder what the parameters were around that. Like, how was he given a budget?
Well, that's the problem.
He
was given a budget and that was it. It's like, here you go. Here's your budget, which he, from what I've learned or read, constantly went over. And they were supposed to be X amount of minutes long, which he constantly went over because he's Albert Brooks and he thinks he can do whatever he wants. This is why I don't like Albert Brooks. Okay, fine. You got it out of me. This is.
I didn't think.
Albert Brooks is a genius. Albert Brooks can do no wrong. Well, I'm not saying he's not funny. I'm just saying I don't find him as funny as everyone else apparently does. So obviously I'm in the minority. I don't know.
You don't have him on a pedestal. That's all.
I do not.
Oh, well.
Oh, well, let's not naysay. Let's not be so negative here.
No.
We have 5 more of these over the course of the season to get into, so I'll save it for then.
I thought you were going to say we have 5 more hours of sketches to go through because this show is far from over. But our next bit is one of my favorite sketches from the first season because it's so nonsensical.
This particular sketch or the idea of the bees themselves?
I think the idea of the bees themselves, but I really like the bee hospital sketch. All of the bees waiting around for their bee children to be born. And then the nurse comes out and says, it's a worker. And all the guys are like, congratulations, it's a worker. And then...
No, they're drones. And then it's like, then you're...
Yeah, it's a drone. Right.
Worker. And then they end the quote unquote episode. And then the punchline feels like it's like the next week on Bee Hospital where it's the queen.
Yes.
I don't know what that did to it. Like what that added to the sketch. I didn't really get that little bit, but
again, it was a TV show, right? Like that is actually a TV show bit. And then
right.
That's all. Anyway, that's our first bee sketch, which we see throughout the first season. That includes most of the cast, right?
It includes almost everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, think about it now. I don't know who it doesn't include.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that they came up with the bees in general was Lauren wanted some type of a sketch where they could showcase everybody or at least show everybody. So it was written by his wife, Rosie Schuster. And, it's another short sketch. It feels to me like it's been forever since we've actually had a sketch in this episode. I can't remember. I mean, what was it? Was it the trial? That wasn't the last sketch.
Shark Bite was the last sketch.
Shark Bite. Right. Just to me, it was just like, that was the first thing that came to my mind when this came on, that I was like, oh, right, we're watching a sketch show. I mean,
right. I mean, I think that's part of it, right? At this point, it's not really a sketch show. It's kind of a...
Right. No, you're right. It's more of a variety and they're, again, seeing what sticks. But it was nice to see a sketch again. But much like everything else tonight, once we start getting into it, before we know it, it's over.
From there, we have another pre-tape with...
Another commercial. Yes. Number 4 for those of you keeping score.
Academy of Better Careers. Which is, I don't know. You want to explain this one? I just think it's weird.
Do I have to?
Well, no, I will. For context. So Gilda answers the phone. This is like a day in the life sketch where Gilda's just a homemaker, as they would say in the 70s. And she answers the phone and there's an actor who shows up. And
I like how you quantify homemaker in the 70s. I'm glad you made sure that we don't do that anymore.
No,
okay, I'm sorry.
I don't.
Go ahead. Continue.
But then it's this guy trying to convince her to go.
I don't. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So then she answers the phone. This guy's trying to convince her to get a better career. And the better career is just answering telephones. That's it. It's to work at a call center, essentially. And the whole premise of the bit is that they will teach you how to answer the phone. And honestly, the only funny part of this sketch to me is they have everyone in a classroom setting. And the way that both Dan Aykroyd and Garrett Morris are answering telephones, they're like practicing picking it up off of the hook.
Which I totally missed. And I don't know if it's because my mind was just getting like overstimulated with something new every 3 minutes, but I totally missed that. And the biggest thing I took from this, like I thought it was a funny premise. It was a funny idea, but it felt very much something that could play like on the Lampoon Radio Hour. Like it was an audio joke. I got nothing visual from this, but I felt like if I closed my eyes, I'd find it as funny. But I missed the bit that you did.
Yeah, no, this was a radio bit.
This is something that would have played on the radio. Yeah.
Yeah. It was what it was. It felt like filler. Not a lot of filler because it's only like 2 minutes long, but
you get to see Akira Yoshimura.
And I think you see Jacqueline Carlin again.
Probably, yeah.
who's the guy in this commercial? Is that Michael Coe?
Wendell Craig he's the guy who is the spokesperson.
The pitch man.
That's again still trying out people who see what's worked, what doesn't.
It doesn't.
Speaking of what doesn't work, nice segue. Very nicely done.
Yeah. The next bit was a guest performance by Valeri Bromfield.
This is a shame.
Go on. What do you mean by that?
Well, like, because I feel like this is not a good set.
Yeah. Valeri Bromfield comes out and does a stand-up bit, but it is very disjointed.
I think reason why I said this was a shame is her bit was supposed to be like double this. And they went so far over that they had to cut everything down, and they had to cut her down to 2 minutes. Because if you watch this, she like jumps from like one to the other like she's a teacher, then she's a student, then she's a volleyball thing. And like, there's no thread.
No.
And I don't blame her for this. I mean, this is one of the things we mentioned it earlier. You know, Lorne Michaels was so worried about having enough material for the show that he overbooked it. And so famously, Billy Crystal is bumped from this episode. They were supposed to be 2 comedians in addition to George Carlin.
And in addition to Andy Kaufman.
Right. Yeah.
So 3, right?
So they were supposed to have 3 stand-up comedians. And this was even before dress rehearsal. They go to Billy and they go to Valeri and they say, listen, we need you to both of you need to cut your bits down to 2 minutes. And apparently Billy's was like a 5 to 6 minute bit that was all one of those long, like narrative kind of bits.
Yep.
And Billy Crystal couldn't do it. And his manager's like, we can't do it. We're not going to do it. We're going to pull him. And Billy Crystal gets pulled from the episode before the dress rehearsal on Saturday. So if you ever look at the ads for this back in the day, or if you go online, you find them, they all tout Billy Crystal being on the show because he was up until Saturday afternoon.
Interesting. Yeah.
So Valeri Bromfield's like, okay, I'll figure out how to make it work. So she took what was a 5 or 6 minute bit and cut it down to 2. And it's like, you can tell. I mean, she just
why couldn't she have taken Billy Crystal's 2 minutes and had 4 minutes?
That's a great question. I don't know. But it's not like she's not funny. Anything negative I say about this performance is like the situation she got thrown into. Like, she's funny. She went on and wrote for the new show when Lorne Michaels created that. She was like a producer on Kids in the Hall. She comes from Second City. She was Dan Aykroyd's comedy partner in Canada. So she obviously knows what she's doing. And I think she does come back later on in season 1, probably as a "we're sorry, let us make it up to you" performance. Right. But that to me is, again, I don't blame her. She just got stuck in a really crappy situation. And unfortunately, it just looks thrown together.
It's a shame. Like, you cut her to 2 minutes, but then you keep in the next pre-tape, which is the "show us your guns." I don't even know what it is. Like, this was something that totally just, I was like, what is this?
Well, it's them traveling, quote unquote, the country, asking people to show us your guns.
I understand it's a comment on gun ownership in the United States. I get it.
And sadly, I mean, I don't know how funny it is. Even then, I don't know how funny it is, but it is sadly relevant. Like it plays today. I mean, you could redo this today and it'd be the same, sadly.
There was no setup to this, really.
Well, I mean, it's a short film. I mean, there's no setup to Albert Brooks's film. It's a short film. I mean, it's a short film.
I guess, yeah. No matter what, statement you're trying to make with it or whatever, it's just kind of like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting example of them trying to make a statement about something. It just didn't really hit for me on any level. I mean, because there's no real jokes other than like people in, these random situations, a bride and groom, a wedding party, an old lady pulling out a gun.
Right.
Except
everyone.
Go ahead. Yeah, go.
Everyone pulls out a gun except for the cop. They wave to the cop and he looks for his gun and then just shrugs. He's like, I don't know. And then just waves to the camera. That's the bit.
No, I agree. And I would always prefer more live stuff than pre-tapes, and especially the films. Like, one short film is enough. I don't think you need 2.
Right.
I didn't love it. I'm with you. Like, I didn't love it. It wasn't great. You could have cut it out and put Billy Crystal in or give Valeri Bromfield her full set. Like, I I don't know.
Yeah.
Home stretch. Here we go. Home stretch.
Home stretch. All right. So in the home stretch here, we go to our fourth stand-up routine from George Carlin of the night.
I would say his best. Would you agree?
I definitely agree.
And I
Yes.
have a theory as to why.
Please tell me.
So as we discussed, George Carlin, obviously not in any sketches. When he like made this deal with Lauren about wanting to pull out from sketches, all he wanted to do were monologues, stand-up routines. Lauren said, fine, but nothing offensive. We can't cross the line. We can't do anything. And he said, no problem. I do not believe he did the religion bit in the dress rehearsal. He had done something else. And at the last minute on live air, he does this routine, which got the most response from people, the most complaints. And I feel like that's why this comes off as the funniest, is because he knew what he was doing. He knew he was being a little dangerous, and he was enjoying it the most. I think you could tell. And I think that's why this plays is the best.
Absolutely. It definitely felt like the meat of his set that he was doing at the time. And he definitely felt the happiest doing it too.
Yeah. And remember the time, this is 1975, even at 11:30 at night or whatever time it is now.
Right.
2:15 in the morning at this time.
It just feels like 2:15. It's only
like
12:30-ish.
Yeah. But even at this point, like, you aren't talking about religion. You're not criticizing. You're not making it fun. So to do that on national television is a thing, which is, probably why.
Oh yeah. He's being edgy, as it were. Right. And that's George Carlin. George Carlin loves that.
I mean, this is probably the edgiest bit of the night.
Definitely.
Show Your Guns probably was trying to be, but this definitely did it better.
Yeah. I mean, there were a few jokes here and there, but no, this was the most cutting edge thing of the night. And it's good. It's a good Carlin stand-up bit.
It's a good way to round third and head home.
Absolutely. And that leads into another Billy Preston number, Fancy Lady.
The anti-Janis Ian. Billy Preston bringing it.
Yeah. We have two more performances still. The first one is introduced by Don Pardo, introducing Billy Preston again.
Again with the Pardo again.
Don Pardo. Pardo.
Like evil Don Pardo is Don Pardo. Now I can't say it right.
Anyway, Billy Preston comes on and sings Fancy Lady. And again, they kill it. Like he and his band.
What are you going to say? Another great performance.
These guys are awesome. They're so much fun. The audio is better in this performance.
It's a little better. It feels a little bit better, yeah. But I mean, again, I can see the drummer hitting a snare drum, but I don't hear it.
Yeah. It's faintly there, but it's great. I mean, Billy Preston is amazing.
Billy Preston brings the soul.
It is kind of jarring how completely opposite their two performances are. But he's great. It was a wonderful, the band is solid from what we can hear. It was a great performance.
Yeah, and it felt like a good interlude. Like it felt like hey, here's a good break. We're going to show you the musical act again before we get back to the rest of the show. Like this, it works, the placement works, the energy works. It's great. Billy Preston is a great musical guest for this show.
No, Billy Preston is phenomenal.
There were stories that, Lorne Michaels, I think, first wanted Stevie Wonder and Carole King and settled for Billy Preston and Janis Ian. But regardless, Billy Preston does a great job.
And we didn't talk about his jacket, but man, his jacket that he wears during this performance, he has like little sequined flowers on the lapels and on the wrists. And it's gorgeous. Like the way it sparkles in that light on the film in the 70s. It's like totally 70s.
Do you know how much more of an episode? We don't have time for you to go all Joan Rivers on this. We have to keep things moving.
We only have 15 sketches left. Yeah.
I'll handle this. So our next sketch, Home Security. We go back live to Home Securities, a Dan Aykroyd sketch that he wrote where he plays the salesman, spokesperson, if you will, for a home security system as he breaks into John Belushi and Gilda Radner's living room, convincing them that they need a home security system. This is a fun sketch. This is actually probably the most fully conceived, what we would call sketch of the night. It's got more than one note. It's not just a lead up to a punchline. Like there's a start, middle, and end. There's kind of a story. Things happen. people seem to be characters and have, their own things going on. Like it works really well. I feel like it.
Absolutely. And it really is the first sketch we've seen all show that like this type of sketch lives on throughout the history of the show moving forward.
Well, this really almost is like the genesis of what sketches become.
Right.
Like an actual sketch, not a joke. Everything else almost felt like a joke or a run up. Like we have a punchline or we have a gag. Let's give you a run up to that gag. The trial was a gag to show you Gilda. The bees were really that kind of joke at the end. Wolverine was, it was a lead up to the heart attack. So it's like, this was the first and only one tonight where it's like, here's an arc, here's an actual story, quote unquote, for a sketch.
Everyone's great. Like Belushi even plays this really subtle and straight. Garrett Morris does not overact in this sketch like he did in the trial.
Dan Aykroyd is his classic pitchman persona, which, his voice is perfect for. Much like I think almost all the sketches, maybe not the bees, but like most of these sketches were sketches people had already. Like they used them before, they knew they worked, they played them. So they weren't trying a lot of new stuff out. Yeah, this is like a Dan Aykroyd one he had from when he was up in Canada. And you can tell because it's very Dan. It's very his voice. It's very written for him to speak. It showcases him really well. It's like that, the pitchman.
Yep.
That he's so good at.
There's the one bit where he shoots blanks at Belushi, and the way that Belushi reacts to that and just like jumps is the first look we have into Belushi's physical bigness. Like the way he can move his body and convey emotion just through his body is amazing.
Yeah. And I got to give Gilda, I thought Gilda had the best joke of this sketch where when Aykroyd sits on the couch and he asks Belushi, like, would you want your wife to get sexually assaulted in the kitchen? Well, no. And he goes to Gilda, would you want to be sexually assaulted? And she's like, well, it depends on who it is. he like steamrolls right over. So if you don't listen, you're going to miss the line.
It's definitely, that's the funniest line in this sketch.
I'm going to ask you a question, Mr. Cromer. I want you to answer me quite honestly.
Huh?
Would you want your wife to be sexually assaulted in her own kitchen?
No, of course not.
Mrs. Cromer, would you want to be sexually assaulted in your own kitchen?
Well, it would depend on who the person
Look,
is.
Mr. Cromer.
But it's a really good sketch, really well thought out, like you said, and like top to bottom. I think it's great.
Yeah, it ends well. Like it's a fully formed sketch. Yeah. It's nice. It's interesting that it comes so late in the show.
It is interesting. And I wonder why, because there's so many things that you're like, oh, this is definitely better than that. But maybe there was fear in the length of it too, because it's the longest sketch of the night. Yeah,
that's true. Could be.
After that, we're treated to another weird commercial.
Weird?
For razors. Yeah, I don't know. It was like, what are we doing?
Are you serious?
Yeah, I don't know. It was just like
I love this commercial.
I know you do.
In this episode, in general, I think this is a great, again, one of their best bits, end of the night. I thought this is probably, this or Try Open is the best parody of the night.
Yeah, I definitely liked Try Opening better, but it is very straightforward and very dry humor.
The whole joke being this was the time of the double-edged razor had just come out.
Well, you see the progression of the evolution of razors, right? That's the whole bit, is the evolution of razors starting with the caveman.
And they show you the progression up to most recently, oh, now we have razors with 2 blades. And the joke being how ridiculous that is, which is only even now more funny because by the 90s, you'd have a triple razor. And now I think you've got, 4 or 5 blades?
Oh, yeah. The line at the end is because you'll believe anything.
They've only prophesized what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Which I think is hilarious.
No, it's funny.
And this is like the grandfather to I think it's, do you remember this sketch? I want to say it's like 90s SNL, where the whole joke is it's like a 9-blade razor. And it's almost the same exact setup. And they're like, it does this, and this blade is the phantom blade. It does nothing. It just keeps going. And whenever I think of this, I think of that sketch as well, which I also love, which we got to look up and find.
Yeah, that would be a good one to see.
But comedy-wise, they're 2 solid pieces to end the night.
And they are the last 2 comedy pieces of the night.
Because we have Janis in again.
Yeah. Yeah. So we go from these 2 really strong bits, the home securities and the triple track razor, a great end to the night, except we still have one more musical performance by Janis Ian, this time at the piano.
Still miserable.
She just He looked like, I want no parts of this singing in the winter.
In the winter. Yeah, it was off that same album as at 17. I think it was released as a single, wasn't as successful, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to drag Janis Ian down anymore, other than to say that this is a very interesting note to end your episode on.
And it's another song that feels longer than it is. It's only about 2.5 minutes, but it feels longer. And it does wrap up the night. It is a weird way to go out from a show.
Just feels anticlimactic. You know what I mean? It's like you've had some funny bits, you come back, here's a performance, and you're like, oh, okay. It's like out with a whimper.
Yeah, I don't understand it, especially when you realize, oh, they had Billy Preston playing 15 minutes ago. You could have just swapped those two performances and it would have ended on a much better note.
Yeah, totally.
But it is what it is, and you learn from these mistakes moving forward.
Yeah, like we said, there's a lot of learning in this episode. So
yeah, it's a weird ending to a weird show.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a weird show. Yeah, we get, Carlin does come back out and does the good nights by himself.
You have all of these performers, all of these special guests, all of the cast, and the only one on stage at the end of the night is George Carlin plugging his new album.
Yeah, it didn't bother me. It bothered, I think you notice it now because you're used to it at the time.
Right.
I bought that. It made sense.
Yeah, no, I was going, that's what I was alluding to. Like, I don't think it looks jarring now because of the last 48 years.
I don't think that little stage could have held all those people anyway.
No, it is a small stage.
Carlin as well misquotes the repertoire.
Does he?
Calls them the not quite ready.
That's right. Yes.
For primetime players.
Right. I don't think it was a bad way to go out. And then we have the closing credits.
Which I found interesting, and I never remembered this, that the first 3 credits we see are ads, like thank you ads, like, sponsors. That was weird.
Right. I think it was weird. They sold sponsorships to sell this show. NBC did, and that's the trade-off, right?
Yeah, and then they credit them before we see Lauren's credit. And then they have the Bud joke, where everyone's middle name is quote unquote Bud, which I kind of like the idea that like they're still toying with you literally to the bitter end. Like, we're going to throw this joke that's just a silly thing of like, well, it's funny how people call each other Bud for no reason. Like, I like that. It was funny.
Is that where it came from?
Yeah, I think it was like a Lorne Michaels joke where he just thought it was funny how people would just nickname themselves Bud. He's like, what if we just called everybody Bud in the credits?
That's funny. All right. It's funnier now that I know that. Well, overall, there was a lot in this first episode. A lot of short bits, sketches, musical guests, special guests, Muppets, Albert Brooks. But all in all, it's a solid episode for the first one ever.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you for most of that. I think you're completely right. There's just tons of stuff in here as they were trying to figure out literally in real time what works, what doesn't, how to put a show together. There are some really good bits. There are some really bad bits. The pacing, I feel like there's just so much stuff.
I think that's the thing. There are so many bits because they're not sketches, right? But there's like stand-up bits, comedy bits, music bits. There was a lot.
But then there are sketches. I mean, there's like 5 live sketches.
There are.
Which I think in a regular show, 5 live sketches, I feel like eventually feels like a lot. But there's 5 live sketches, weekend update, 2, comedy performances, 4 musical acts, 4 monologues, a lot.
There's a lot there. And 2 short films.
Oh, right. And 2 short films.
I think for this being the first episode of a show ever, essentially the pilot, there are enough building blocks here that you can say, okay, this definitely worked and we're going to keep it. And this definitely didn't. And maybe not even definitely didn't, but some things that they're like, you see after the first season, definitely how they've learned and what they use from this show even that carries through.
Well, you establish a cold open. You establish, after your opening, your host comes back out and does a monologue or whatever that's going to be. You establish weekend update. You have musical, you're going to have musical guests come on and do a couple songs. So there's definitely stuff in there that works. Host comes on at the end of the night, says goodbye. So there's tons of building blocks there.
Commercial parodies.
Classic
just
point.
The layout of the home security sketch, like we said, like that's a fully formed sketch in the way that it's presented and then is presented many different variations throughout the years. You have TV shows.
You have the talk show. You have a short film. Maybe you don't need 4 of them or 3 of them, but a short film works, which that'll go on till present day. You'll have short films as a part of it. So that works.
Yeah. No, I think as we talk through this more, they have a lot of things that worked. They just didn't work in the iteration that we see in the first show.
Yeah. This episode as a building block, great. As a standalone episode, not their best, not their strongest by any means. But if you want to nitpick, if you want to pick things out of it, you can. That really work. But yeah, all in all, like, this is not a highlight classic episode.
Yeah. Look, this was the first episode. It wasn't perfect. They were trying to figure it all out on the fly. And it shows. But I think all in all, they succeeded.
They definitely could see it. I think it'll be more fun, too, as we get into it, where they try to figure it out more on their feet, when they don't rely so much on pre-tapes and films, and it's much more sketches or monologues or character pieces live, as opposed to cutting away, because they still haven't figured that part out yet. And it's going to take a little while. Yeah.
I think that is the key. I think for them figuring out, we need to lean into the live part of the show and the live audience that we have here. Once they figure that out, then it's very different.
Yeah. And then it starts clicking.
So let's finish up with our must-see bits then. Brad, what are your favorite bits from this show?
Must-see things for me, Mighty Mouse, Triple Track. I think it's a great parody. I think it sets things up. And for nostalgia's sake, I would say Wolverines, just because it's the very first one, and I think you'd have to see it. And it's so short, it's not going to kill you.
I think for me, Mighty Mouse, I agree. My favorite commercial was Triopenin. And honestly, I think Home Securities, because it's such a foundational piece of how things go. And also Billy Preston. Go back and watch Billy Preston if you're interested in watching any live performances from the 70s.
Yeah, that was a pleasant surprise. I'm not that familiar with Billy Preston, and I did enjoy watching him perform. 100%.
Absolutely. Anything else?
I would just say thank you to everybody for listening. We hope you like the show. If you like it, give a rating and review, and please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And you can find us on social media. We're out there on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, drop us a line.
Next week, we have episode 2 with host Paul Simon and the musical guests Randy Newman and Phoebe Snow, and a special appearance by Art Garfunkel.
I hope you like Paul Simon.
Until then, good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.